Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, hi, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers here to talk Seahawks football. We're talking training camp. The rookies report on the 17th this week to training camp. The veterans report next week on the 24th when training camp will really kind of start in earnest. But we want to go ahead and get a jump on kind of previewing training camp for the Seahawks this year. It's a big year, a lot of change, new era in Seahawks football. The Mike Macdonald era begins. And we're here to talk about the offense today. We're going to do the defense in the next show. Welcome in, Keith. How you doing?
Doing good. I'm excited for real football. Like, it may be practice, but it's still football. And we are getting very, very close. So very much looking forward to the start of camp.
Yeah, it's kind of nice to get the rookies in. It gives them an opportunity to kind of be rookies and without having the pressure of everyone else in camp yet, kind of get some things going first, give them a little leg up. What do you think are going to be the biggest storylines? I guess that's kind of the show, really, in essence, or what are the storylines on offense and defense? What are the biggest questions to answer in training camp? So let's kind of start. I think in your specialty, the offensive line. I think to me, that's the biggest question mark on the offense. That's probably a good place to start because I tell you what, if Ryan Grubb's offense is going to succeed this year, it's going to be because of the play up front, really.
Yeah, the play up front has to improve. Otherwise, it's not going to matter what he does.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I agree. And it makes everything else run easy. You know, the running game needs to work in conjunction with what Geno Smith is doing, et cetera, et cetera. Let's start on the interior. I was going to start the conversation at right guard, just because I think that's the one spot that everyone's kind of talking about that's unresolved as we head into training camp, where the competition is essentially wide open. Maybe the coaches have somebody in mind.
Do you really think it's wide open?
Well, that's the perception. The perception is this spot has not yet been completely settled. And the reason for that is Anthony Bradford was out in mini camps with a little injury. Christian Haynes ran with the second team most of the time, if not all the time there. And a kid we, at least casual Seahawks fans, never heard of, Bradford Curtis, took all the starter reps. And so there are questions then, because of all that, as to who really wins this thing. Now, for me, it seems like an easy choice. I think maybe the coaches see it the same way, but if they're really going to open this up to an open competition, could be anybody's job.
See, I don't see it as an open competition or that it's anyone's job. I think this is how long does it take for Christian Haynes to know enough of the offense and what they're doing to be inserted with the ones? Because right now, the reason why he's not is because he's a rookie and because they're trying to get him caught up on all that other stuff. So that way, every rep that they do with the ones is beneficial for everyone, and things aren't breaking down because of, a rookie moving the wrong direction or completely missing a read or that kind of stuff. Once he shows that he's got enough of it that the reps don't get wasted, then he'll be with the ones, and it's his job. They didn't draft him for him to be on the bench. He was their second pick in the draft. He was their third round pick. They are expecting him to start from day one, and as soon as he's ready, he will be. So, barring injury or some sort of weird setback, I can't imagine a situation where he doesn't start.
Well, just a reminder, Anthony Bradford was a mid-round pick as well. Came in, yielded 28 pressures in 10 games, but the good news was he had 10 starts. He is the second most tenured offensive guard in this entire offense. And, he's a pretty decent run blocker. Had good grades run blocking last year. Poor against defending the pass rush. Yeah. And And so when you look at Christian Haynes, I agree with everything you said, by the way. When you look at Christian Haynes, he was drafted in the 3rd round for a reason, but I think he was drafted a little later than maybe he should have been.
Mm-hmm.
And then a 2-time All-American at UConn, went to the Senior Bowl, had a great week, powerful blocker, really, and has quick enough feet and lateral agility to be a good pass blocker as well. And he was a good pass blocker at the college level. And so the expectation is he comes in and takes the job. I agree with that. I think that I'm in the same boat you are. How long is it going to take? Is it going to be by the first game? I mean, really, that's all that counts. And I would say yes. Now, is it going to be week 1, week 2, week 3? I don't know, but we'll find out. But talk to me a little bit about the other guys. Like, we kind of expect this Christian Haynes thing to kind of come in and work, and that's the way it's going to be. But, Anthony Bradford, now Bradford Curtis, just aren't going to lay down. These guys have their sights on that job.
Sure, they can have their sights on that job, but they are both have a much lower ceiling than Christian Haynes.
How do you know that for sure?
A lower floor.
How do you know that for sure, other than just kind of what you've heard?
Well, because of what I saw in college tape. Like, Bradford was a guy that was powerful. He kind of looked right, and he's
6'5", 232.
And his 332. No, there's no 230 pounds.
I'm sorry, I had it written down as 2. Yeah, they're 332.
Yeah, so he's got a particular build and whatever, and his college tape is full of him driving guys backwards. And so you're like, all right, there's stuff to work there. But he was far from polished. There was a lot of work to be done. He was one of those guys that, we thought he had a reasonably high ceiling, but he also had a really low floor. And he never really showed any kind of the lateral movement that we were hoping him to develop, which is why he was so bad in pass blocking. And I just don't think that his ceiling is that high because he just isn't quick enough. I don't know much about Bradford Curtis other than, no matter how bad things got last year, he never got a single look.
Well, it's kind of an uphill battle for a guy like Bradford Curtis because he comes out of Chattanooga, smaller college. He did get invited to the Senior Bowl and he played up to that competition, but then he kind of went undrafted or late 7th round pick. I can't remember for sure by Las Vegas, and then basically cut. And we picked him up off the practice squad, or he wasn't. Yeah, he was cut. He was on their practice squad for a week. We picked him up, kept him on the active roster all year. Here he is, and then he took the 1 reps. I think that's where the excitement is. Maybe it's misplaced. It probably is. It's mini camp. He takes the starter reps, kind of played, and then you started to hear positive things about him. And then now here we are. Bradford didn't take any snaps, and Christian Haynes was with the
positive things about him because people are asking, hey, who's this kid with the ones? And they're not going to say negative things about him. But it's one of those things. The rookie offensive linemen never get those first team reps right away because there's so much learning to do. And
Lucas didn't either.
Yeah. And there were very few, there are very few reps. And you don't want to waste one because a rookie does the wrong thing and it just screws everything up.
So let's stick with the interior of the offensive line, Keith, and talk to me about Oluwatimi. I think that's another story that is going to develop this.
To me, this is the bigger story, because Oluwatimi played in a game and a half last year. He did some okay things. He looked about the same as Evan Brown, who wasn't good, but wasn't terrible. But he certainly wasn't good. And so Oluwatimi looks like he used a guy that they were very similar, in terms of what they did. And now he's being given the starting job with no competition. That's a big leap given what we've seen. And they didn't bring a guy in to compete with them. They brought in a journeyman backup who, that is what he is. He's a journeyman backup. He's a guy that can, handle some stuff in a pinch, but he is not a starter.
Nick
And
Harris.
so, so they've handed this job to Oluwatimi without a lot of tape, a lot of evidence to show that he's ready.
Right.
To me, that's the much bigger story.
That is true. And all the coaches that were there, that, you know, Cunningham, the offensive line coach, et cetera, they're gone.
They're gone.
They didn't get consulted. They weren't consulted on where he was at. They just kind of evaluated some film, saw his college tape, maybe, you know, talked to John Schneider, obviously, about what the thinking was with him, his development. And you're right. They just kind of penciled it in, maybe even penned it in. Nick Harris is not going to get a starting job in the NFL. He's not that at that level. And I believe that in Oluwatimi. I think that it's going to be his deal. Now, what if he's nicked up or whatever? Is there anybody else that can take snaps? And I don't know. Nick Harris probably gets a game, and that's going to be the way it is. But I think that I don't know if it's necessarily the bigger story than the offensive guard story, but I think in combination with the fact that we've got 3 new starters potentially on the offensive line, not including if Abe Lucas is healthy or not, and we can talk about that in a minute. It's kind of one of my subject lines, is health. If Abe Lucas is gone, we've got 4 new offensive starters on the offensive line this year. That's the big story for me.
Yeah.
Because then you're looking for continuity, and Ryan Grubb can't run his offense if
does
have
continuity matter if the players were terrible?
No, I mean, obviously, but nonetheless, you're starting over, literally.
Yeah. Well, when you're starting over early anyway, because you're bringing in a whole new system. This is the year to make large changes. And so the fact that all 3 interior are going to be different, it doesn't bother me, because everyone's learning a new system anyway.
So how much weight do you put on this then, as far as the offensive line performance, in order for the offense to perform at a level that can compete in the NFC West and the NFC?
That comes down to, you know, how they scheme the offense, because I think in the beginning, you've got to make it simple. And let these guys grow and develop and figure out what's going on, and develop some of that continuity. But you've got to make things simple for the line and for Gino, and just make it very quick, get the ball out of his hands. Hopefully the run blocking is there and they can run it well. Because I mean, you just, it's not going to come instantaneously. It just isn't. I think that Christian Haynes has more upside than anyone on the interior that they had last year. Oluwatimi should be at least not a downgrade, if not a little bit better. The biggest question mark as far as that stuff though goes is Laken Tomlinson. Is he actually good enough at this point in his career? He used to be great, but the last 2 or 3 years have not been good. So at what point is he the guy that ends up being the weakest spot of this?
And Sateo Lumea, the kid they picked up later in the draft, is basically his backup on the left guard spot. Now, McClendon Curtis can play that spot as well. In fact, our lads has him as the primary backup there, so he might be kind of backing up both spots.
Yeah, and it might be one of those things where he might be backing up both spots. And Lumea, I see as a potential swing interior player who can play center. I'd love to see him at center, and give him a shot there, because I think he's got some athletic characteristics that would play really well in that spot.
So let's talk about the offensive tackle, and then let's move on. How do you feel about Cross and Lucas? I know Cross even has trouble pass blocking against guys in our own conference, in our own division. If I'm going to be completely honest, now you see it a slightly different way than I do, but and injuries kind of come in that as a factor. And then there's Abe Lucas. who just still remains to be an unknown at this juncture.
That's the thing. It's just such an unknown because of, we just don't know like what he has going for him with that knee, and if he's going to be anything close to what he was as a rookie. If he is, then he's fine. Would have been the best. He was the best offensive lineman they had 2 years ago, and would have been the best last year if he had been healthy, but he clearly wasn't. So we'll see how that knee is, and we won't know until he gets on the field and we can see it. Cross has been, I don't get the problems people have with Cross. I really don't. He's a, top 10, top 12 tackle in the NFL. Yeah, he's had trouble at times, but he's also been, they put him out on an island with zero help, even when he was hurt and playing through a really bum angle. And I just don't know what people are expecting. I get the feeling that Seahawks fans just, every left tackle will always be compared to Walter Jones. And it's such an unfair way to assess left tackles because they don't.
Well, I disagree with that. Jones. I think people are comparing Charles Cross to every other left tackle, and they're seeing other tackles, better, including one in our own division who's one of the best in the entire NFL with San Francisco. And
yeah, but you're like, oh, they're seeing it better. I'm like, there aren't that many that are better. Yes, yeah, Trent Williams is one. He's also 36 and, multiple All-Pro and all of that, but on the downside of his career, right? Cross has had 2 seasons, one of which he was hurt for most of. And he's been effective anyway. I just don't get the Charles Cross hate. He's better than what you're going to find in Arizona. He's better than what you're going to find with the Rams. He is a, top 10 tackle in this league. And I don't understand why that's not good enough.
Okay. I'll leave it at that. Fair enough. But I still think that he's going to be league average. I think he's, to me, top 12. I don't know. I feel like it's more like a top 20 guy. And that's just a feeling. I don't have any stats to back that up right now.
You think he's a
I would say that he's tackle. 15. No, 15 is average. I'd say 20, so I think he's average to slightly below average currently, given the track record he has with injuries and how injuries play into his effectiveness. You can make all the excuses you want. At some point, you have to measure him against other people with or without injuries, whatever. I'm just saying, if those injuries are causing him to have issues, at some point you just kind of have to accept it because he is injured.
And I'm saying, but he's still playing. Even with the injuries, he's still been effective. I just don't.
I even think that he's a better run blocker than he is a pass blocker. I just think that he's a little slow. He's a little sluggish getting out of his stance against faster, more athletic edge rushers in this league. That's all. And I just think that he's a little bit more finesse. He's, which is fine. I'm just saying that he's fine. He's adequate. He's okay. You're not hearing me say he's exemplary. He's amazing. He's fantastic. We don't have to worry about him. We never have to talk about him because he's constantly doing his job. None of those things are true. That's why I'm saying that I view him as kind of a middle of the road, league average left tackle in this league. And there are some great ones. So there's no shame in being, 12 to 18th in this league.
And I think
as a left tackle.
And I think that undersells him. I think that undersells what.
Let's have a further conversation when we both bring in some stats to kind of back up what we're saying.
Offensive line is not a statistically generated like evaluated position.
Yeah. So, you know, the Seahawks, we can all agree the Seahawks were ranked close to, you know, 25th or 27th in pass block win rates as they're viewed commonly by multiple stat categories. And he was part of that.
Yeah, of course.
And he had issues. Like you go look at his individual stats last year, the pressures allowed, the sacks allowed.
The reason why they were that low was because every other position on the line besides him was in the bottom third.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just saying he's part of a line that is not good. And if you go look at individual performance stuff, and he was next to the best offensive lineman consistency wise that we had last year in Lewis. Now you can say what you want about Lewis, and we do, but he was the best of what we had, and he was right next to him.
I don't agree with that. He was not.
Who was the best last year, Keith?
Of all the offensive linemen, the best offensive lineman that Seattle had last year was Charles Cross.
And he was next to the second best then.
Sure.
So on a bad line, the two guys that were the best were next to each other on that line.
Big drop
and they still had issues
between Cross and him. But okay.
I think that, you know, what we're talking about is semantics, and when we don't really have any firm stats in front of us right now as we're talking. So it's both of us just kind of perceiving, but I will agree with you in that he's one of the better offensive linemen we have. If Abe Lucas is healthy, he's the best. Charles Cross is probably the second best, no doubt. And then just on talent, I'm not talking about injury factors or anything like that. And then I think Christian Hayes is probably the third best, and he hasn't even taken a snap in the NFL.
Yeah,
this offensive line is young and it's inexperienced, and Laken Tomlinson comes in. He's kind of been washed for 2 years in a row, and now he's coming in as the starter without even having to compete for the job. That kind of tells you the state of the offensive line, really.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you've got the three interior spots are a mess. And I think right guard is going to be not a mess here soon when Haynes finally is handed the job. But the other two spots are big question marks. And that just I know everyone's excited for Oluwatimi, and I am too. I think he's got a chance, but he's got 80 snaps in the NFL, of which he wasn't great. And it was 80 snaps. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to look at that and be like, yep, guaranteed he's going to be an improvement.
No, I agree. Okay. So let's go to quarterback. So we've got a new scheme, Keith. Mm-hmm. Ryan Grubb comes in. He's got a couple of good prospects to work with. I think Geno Smith makes the most sense to retain him this year, pay him a little bit more than he was last year, just for the veteran presence on a new scheme and a quarterback that really kind of operates in a way that the Washington offense ran last year. He's pretty good at those things that they like to do. It is predicated on running the ball effectively. And he's shown that he can. There was a few games where he could, and he did quite well doing that. I just don't know that was necessarily the priority from Shane Waldron's offense. And you know,
I don't know. It's hard when you've got Waldron and Pete Carroll in every post game being like, he needs to get the ball out of his hands. He needs to get the ball out of his hands. That was clearly what they wanted him to be doing. And he continued to struggle to get the ball out of his hands. So, yeah, they
weren't the best team in designing plays in the short and intermediate. They weren't the best
team at much of anything.
Right. So, I mean, the short and intermediate routes were just not great. I mean, the route concepts were not great. Now, I thought Shane Waldron did a pretty decent job in his first year, creating some concepts and things that I thought were much different than they were prior. But I think teams figured him out. And I don't know that Geno really had great options early in after he got the ball in his hands. And Yeah. I mean, yes, we agree. He can definitely get the ball out faster. And I think that he will. I think this offense is kind of a better designed to do that. And I think that's going to be a priority given the offensive line situation. And so we'll see. We'll see. I believe that Geno can do it. Is he the long-term answer? We've already had this conversation. Obviously not. But we do have Sam Howell on the roster. That's interesting to me. So I kind of look at Sam Howell as an upgraded version of Drew Lock, a guy that could potentially have something. We've got 2 years to figure it out. He's on a rookie deal.
He's a younger version of Drew Lock.
A younger version, and he played fairly well in spots and stretches in the 2023 season when he started all 17 games. Had over 4,000 yards passing. You know, it was on an awful team. So take it with a grain of salt.
Of course, he was an awful team, and he led the NFL in interceptions. So, granted, they threw the ball a lot. Like, when you've got a bad team and you've got a guy, a first-year starter at quarterback, who's, you know, looked good for the first few games and then started really struggling, teams figured him out. Why are you running the ball that much? That's just poor coaching.
Yeah. I think that he led the league in attempts.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me.
I think completions. I mean, he's up there. Like, it was crazy. Okay. So are you at all interested in seeing this competition, or are you just kind of focusing on other areas that you know are going to be?
I'm kind of focusing on other areas, mainly because it just doesn't excite me. Sam Howell has the potential to make this interesting. And when he does, I will pay closer attention. But until he makes it more interesting, I'm less interested than I probably should be.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I'm opposite. It's like, I'm really intrigued by this kid. He did it really well with a bad team. He kind of plays right into the skill sets that that Ryan Grubb loves to have in a quarterback. And I think that, you know, if Geno wasn't here and we were, having Sam Howell compete with somebody else that hadn't also earned a starting job, this could be very interesting. I think Geno's so kind of entrenched as a leader on the team and in the quarterback room. And I think that the job is just totally his to lose. And I don't see him losing it. Even if Sam Howell plays at a pretty decent level, I think the best outcome for Sam Howell is he makes himself a name and he gets into a tradable asset category for the Seahawks.
Sam Howell has to do something just absolutely unfathomable to unseat Geno, unless Geno really struggles to pick up the new offense.
Agreed.
I don't see that happening either. You know what I mean? Like, I don't expect him to have problems picking up a new offense.
So you'd mentioned other stories that you're more interested in. Why don't you list a couple?
Well, how about wide receiver spots 4 through 6 or 7?
Yeah,
because we know who the top 3 are, right? That's done. But you've got a lot of interesting names. Like, does Eskridge still have a spot on this roster? Where does Jake Bobo's spot work out in year 2 after he kind of carved himself a role last year, but now he's got more competition fighting for those snaps, including a guy like Chenault.
And new coaches who have no alliances whatsoever.
Yeah. And, they've got a bunch of younger players that are in here, trying to compete and get, spots there. Guys like Derek Young, who's healthy, Hayden Hatton, was an undrafted player. Cody White, Aesop Winston, guys that are fighting for roster spots, and maybe, for a couple of them, this might be their last attempt at making a roster and before they call it a career. And so there's a lot of battling that's going to happen there, and a reasonable amount of talent. And so I'm very interested to see how that shakes out. And
agreed.
Yeah. Like, to me, that is It may not be as big in terms of wins and losses as quarterback, but it's more interesting in terms of the roster construction and everything as far as that goes. So yeah, I'm very interested in what's going on there. And another one would be, what the hell is going on at tight end after Fant?
Right.
Like, is there anybody else on this roster that is going to do anything?
Except for be on the field and protect the tackles a little bit, you know, as an inline blocker. I mean, Pharaoh Brown was signed specifically to do that. Pharaoh Brown gives you a little bit of upside to catch the ball. He's probably going to have 10, 12, 14 receptions for the season. So maybe one a game. Brady Russell, Tyler Mabry have been hanging around the practice squad. Brady Russell actually was on the active roster for a while last year, had quite a few special team snaps.
Yeah.
AJ Barner, though, is drafted to be basically Brady Russell's replacement.
Yeah.
As a third tight end.
He was drafted to be Pharaoh Brown's replacement.
Correct. And after this year. Yes.
Yeah. And so he's a blocking first guy with a little bit of athleticism that you see maybe having some pass catching potential eventually, but that's not why he's here. That's not what he's good at. He's a blocking first guy. And so, yeah, you've got Fant, and then you've got a couple of guys that will get on the field occasionally because you want to run two tight ends, and you need a guy that's going to be in there that's going to be able to block well for you.
So, what do you expect as far as pass attempts to tight ends in this new offense?
I expect it to be down.
And it was down last year.
I didn't think it was.
I mean, they had 75. They had,
combined, they had 80, 81 or 82 receptions.
Yes.
And so that's what I mean. And
last year, though, it was down from that. Last year, it was down closer to 60.
Okay. It just, they used to have 3. Now they've got 1. So I expect it to be, because I don't think they're going to be trying. You're not going to see a lot of formations with 3 tight ends like we saw last year. You're going to see a lot of formations with 1 tight end. And so therefore just, in general, you're going to see less attempts going to tight ends, which to me is not a bad thing, because your strength of your weapons is your wide receiver room. And so taking snaps away from Tyler Lockett to give them to Pharaoh Brown, I think is not a smart way of using the talent on your football team.
Agreed. So you think, based on, and we'll talk about this too, because this is one of my topics, is receiving out of the backfield for these running backs. When you take a look at all the talent on players that can catch the ball, you're gonna get them to your athletic guys. You're not going to get it to Pharaoh Brown. I agree, unless it just makes sense to dump it off, pick up first down, and have 3 more downs to work with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, like, when you're designing a game plan, you're not going to take Tyler Lockett snaps away from him to give them to Pharaoh Brown unless there is a specific blocking reason why you feel like you have to. Right? Because if you're designing, okay, we're going to run a particular route concept, you don't want Pharaoh Brown in there for that. You want Tyler Lockett in there for that. I'm saying Lockett because I think he's the 3rd wide receiver this year. And so he would be the guy that comes off the field if you're going to bring in a second tight end. To me, that's not a win talent wise. That's a big loss. So I just don't think we see as many tight end snaps this year.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. I think that, AJ Barner makes the roster. Noah Fant makes the roster. Pharaoh Brown. So you've got Brady Russell, who played tons and tons on special teams last year. Tyler Mabry, Jack Westover, who they picked up undrafted from the University of Washington. Those guys are not making this roster unless something else happens. Because they're not going to carry 4 guys like they did in parts of last year.
The part of it is that the way they structured Pharaoh Brown's contract, I don't think they cut him. And so that makes it hard for any of those other guys to make the roster.
Talk to me about your feeling about who will emerge as running back number 3 and number 4, and the significance of receiving the ball out of the backfield this year.
So there's going to be I honestly believe there's going to be a lot more receptions by running backs this year. It's just the way that the offense is going to be designed and the way it's put together.
We might see a competent screen game for the first time in how many years?
Oh, let's see. The last year that Matt Hasselbeck was here was 2010. So somewhere around there. That was the last time that there was a competent screen game in Seattle. We'll see, because Ken Walker is a type of guy that can do that. He's got good hands coming out of the backfield. Charbonnet, it remains to be seen. We don't really know what he is coming out of the backfield, but we do know he can pass block, so he might be in there. He
had 30 some odd receptions last year, so he's pretty good.
Charbonnet did?
Mm-hmm.
God, I would have not have guessed that it was that high. I would have guessed it was something like 23.
I'll double check.
No, that's interesting if he did, because that's way more than I expected, but it's not a bad thing. Yeah, those guys are going to get it. Now, who comes down to running back 3 and 4? I honestly think that Kenny McIntosh has kind of the inside track there. Didn't play last year, spent most of it on IR. But he's a guy that is known. That's what he does. He is a third down back. He's blitz pickup, catch the ball out of the backfield, nice hands, good routes.
Charbonnet had 33 receptions for 209 yards last year.
That is far better than I remembered, but that's great.
And Kenny McIntosh, no, Kenny McIntosh didn't have anything last year.
No. Ken Walker.
Yeah, looking for Ken.
Yeah, Kenny McIntosh had exactly 0 snaps with the offense. He was active for 3 games. But he did not see the field.
And then Walker had 29 receptions, so 4 less than Zach Charbonnet last year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I think this year, both those things can go up. I think that they could probably have 75 to 80, maybe even slightly more combined receptions out of the backfield.
Yeah.
This year.
They should have more. Like I said, and I think Kenny McIntosh has the inside track for the number 3 spot simply because of what he does in the passing game, but he's undersized and you can't run in between the tackles, and expect good things to happen. So, that's why I think, start looking at running back 4,
mm-hmm.
George Holani out of Boise State is really interesting, in that spot. But the guy that I would say probably is going to have it is Ricky Pearson Jr., who was, last year was his rookie year. This year he's coming in with 1 year under his belt. He's the same age as almost everyone other back on the roster. Everyone is either 23 or 24. That's 24 is the oldest back.
Yeah, he turns 25 in November. But yeah.
Yep. But
6
he's
foot,
big, 217
pounds. Yep.
Yep. At 217, he's the biggest back on the roster. And that's why I think he's got an inside shot to be that 4th guy, because if something happens to Walker or Charbonnet and you need a guy that you can pound up the middle, it's not Kenny McIntosh. And so it's going to be someone like Holani, who's 210, or Pearson Jr., who's 217.
Or somebody that's not on the roster yet.
Or someone who's not on the roster yet.
Okay, so let's wrap this thing up. Give me your overall perception. It seems like we've kind of gotten to a point, at least on this show, where we've tamped things down a little bit compared to the optimism I've been hearing over the last several weeks. When we talked about individual position groups, and we talked with Dan Bienz on a show where we talked about the optimism. Last week we were talking about some optimistic things, and now this show seems kind of a little bit more subdued as far as how we're feeling overall. And a lot of it has to do with kind of the offensive line.
It's just the line. I love what they've got at wide receiver. You know, at 1, 2, 3, they're as good as any team in the NFL. You know, they got good stuff going on at tailback with both their running backs there. Fancy good at tight end. You've got enough going for you at quarterback, whether it be Howell or Geno, to win games, but you've got to get something up front. And
is it possible or not possible to have all the answers by the first game?
I actually think you can, because right tackle is Lucas's knee healthy or not? I think you can answer that. At right guard, if Christian Haynes wins that job, which I expect him to do before, probably before the second preseason game, it'll be his. Then yeah, that's answered. I think Oluwatimi will step up and answer some questions. Whether or not he's the long-term solution, that question won't be answered, I don't think, until you can get a chance to see him for a while. But still, he will have answered some questions, and you're going to know if Tomlinson has anything left in the tank, any tread left on those tires.
Well, certainly, if McClendon Curtis goes over there and beats him, or a rookie Lumea, who we're not even talking about yet, comes in and beats him, then we'll know. If he starts the regular season, I expect him to play at some certain level of competency that we can rely on.
Or at least they're letting him be a veteran stabilizing presence until there's been enough like establishment of everyone else that they feel okay making that transition to a younger player.
So what I hear you're saying is that you'll be able to get to a point where you're going to feel either very comfortable or not going forward. Even though it's going to be young, you're still going to have guys that are taking some of their first snaps in the NFL. At least we'll begin that road to continuity. We'll begin that road to stabilizing the offensive line with some young, nice talent.
Yeah. That doesn't mean it's going to be pretty, because they are young and they are going to make mistakes and they are going to do that. But it's easy to handle the mistakes and some of that when you can see the potential, right? When you know that the more you play them, the better they're going to get. That wasn't the case with Evan Brown last year. When he was out there playing, you knew that was all you're ever going to get, which is why I was surprised they didn't go to Oluwatimi more, because he looked about the same when he was out there, and he has significantly more upside. So
and a future, right?
Yeah. So I was surprised they didn't make that move, but that was sort of Pete Carroll's thing the last few years, is not going to the rookies quite as easily as he did early in his Seahawk tenure. And so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, because, I think that all these questions will definitely be answered. I'm anxious to kind of see everything kind of come together. We're going to, be talking about the scheme and the coaching and so forth as we move through this, because I just don't think that we're going to get a great feel for how the scheme is going to really unfold during the season in preseason. But I think, watching the players individually and figuring out who's in the pecking order and all that kind of stuff will be the storylines to watch on both sides of the ball. And so next time we get together, we're going to talk about defense. Name one subject you think we should cover for sure.
Middle linebacker, like where these guys are in terms of their health and that. And then also, let's assume they are healthy. Exactly what do they bring?
I agree. That's a big storyline. That's the biggest storyline for me.
That's the biggest storyline.
Maybe not the biggest, because the actual position at middle linebacker is not the biggest.
Yeah, but to me, it's the biggest question mark on the defense, and it's the biggest story, because
will average play at that position hold the entire defense back, or will we need far below? Will we need far below average play in order for it to make a real difference?
I think you can make up for it.
Does it make it a big story?
it makes it a big story because we're used to Bobby Wagner being there. And anytime you move on from Bobby Wagner, from one of the greatest to ever put on a helmet, it's a story. And so knowing what we get out of them and knowing what to expect and knowing, there had to have been a reason other than financial why you would move on from Bobby Wagner. We know what it is. You and I know what it is. Sure. But those are still huge, huge shoes to fill. And it makes it a story. Even if middle linebacker in this defense is not as critical as it was, say, in Pete Carroll's defense.
Yeah, I think even more so in that Mike McDonald runs nickel, 72% of the time.
So of the two interior linebackers, one of them will be on the field for a lot of the snaps, and that's it.
Yes. So hopefully we can get one out of the three to show up.
Yeah.
Okay. And we'll record that show here soon because you're going to have some time off, so that's going to be good.
Yeah. I'm heading to the beach, and I'm looking forward to it.
I like it. Okay, let's get out of here. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. The show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Find it on your favorite podcast platform or our YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button, share it, leave a comment, all that good stuff. So until next show, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks fans, wherever you may be, thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football.